Okay, so thank you for being here. First, I would like to start off with a general question.
Okay.
Why are you running for city council? What is your biggest motivation behind your decision?
Okay. So I've been in Nashville 32 years now. And since that time, I've pastored for 23 years. I've started a nonprofit organization, taught in the public schools. All of those things have motivated me to do what I can to improve the city. It's my personal belief that we have some serious challenges. And I believe my experience and background prepared me to represent all of Davidson County as a council at large representative.
hmm I've noticed on your profile that you have extensive experience in educational training and just working in the education industry in general.
Mhm.
So my question is, how has your background as an educator prepared you to be on the Metro Council?
Okay. So anyone that is on the council is supposed to be guided by, in my view at least anyway, the city charter. And part of my educational our day-to-day activity and representing constituents also. So it's in that regard, formalize research and analyzation and things of that nature. Is what best is how I best use my education to understand those processes and to act on them.
hmm and also on the platform section of your website, you have identified education as one of your three major issues. So I
Absolutely.
was just wondering what specific steps would you like to take to improve Nashville's public education?
Great question. Thank you for that question. So in 2008, I was one of a 40-member task force impaneled by the mayor at that time, Mayor Carl Dean, to identify how we can address issues in the public schools then that continue today. And while on that, I use my experiences from the nonprofit to offer that information that we are talking about in terms of my Promised Neighborhood model. And as a nonprofit director, we put together a model for parent engagement as well as 21st century learning communities. So the problem is there's a breakdown between what happens at school and for the children what happens at in their community or at the home. My 21st century model allows parents to be trained and encouraged and empowered to become real partners in the educational process.
hmm I also see that you voice your support of a family-centered approach to improving education.
Absolutely.
So on that note, how do you plan to increase parental involvement?
Great question. As I mentioned, I've written a workbook on parent involvement training, specifically in terms of their engagement in education. As a council at large person, I'm not representing one particular council district, but all of them. So directly, I intend to work very closely with each council member of each of the 35 council districts to be able to look at the circumstances relative to children that are in our public schools from those districts and determine how we can best on the voting precinct level work with those parents to also need in order to be able to do better and to improve academically.
Thank you for your reply. You also mentioned on your website that you would like to focus on economic development as well.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
my next question for you is that can you tell us a little bit more about the Davidson County Economic Empowerment Zone that you have proposed?
Yes, ma'am. That's a monster of my development. Now, it's based on the 1995 economic development model from the federal government, the same idea, where they used census tracking to determine where there were areas that were socially economically disadvantaged for a period of time, and to identify where there are the greatest chances of building entrepreneurships and things of that nature. So on my website, you'll find that I have a full presentation. And what I've looked at is how we can go to now what the 2017 Opportunity Act, which is a part of the new tax code, has identified ways by which funds can be negotiated, if you will, as a tax incentive and they've identified 18 areas in Davidson County, what they call opportunity zones, based on census tracking. And so if you go to the website, you'll see how we've intimated how working through the council will establish a platform by which we can work in each of the neighborhoods or voting precincts, working with the council people again, to form those things and to take advantage of federal, state, and local resources to encourage entrepreneurial development. I believe that is tangentially related to the crime problem we have for the older individuals, and it may be able to prevent some of the young people who are encouraged to engage in criminal activity.
Mm-hmm. That's a really great answer.
Thank you.
So since we covered the socioeconomic situation of Nashville, another question I have is that as the population in Nashville is predicted to be over 1 million by 2025.
Yes, ma'am.
What is your plan to tackle this citywide unemployment while addressing the population growth?
So that's again related to the economic piece.
Yes.
I ran for state senate in 2018. While on that trail, I met many young people who are those who either dropped out of our public schools or who have been incarcerated, who've come out and who've been working to reintegrate themselves in society and so forth. So there are challenges basically for them. And what I've done was been able to identify how it is they can catch up with the economic boom and growth that's going on in Nashville. I'm not against growth, and the city needs that to compete with other cities its size, but we don't need to leave, particularly those who've been in Nashville all of their lives. They don't need to be left behind. So that's one of the major ways that I would look at the public safety issue, as well as the economic equity issue, is by working again on a voting precinct level to identify where the greatest needs is, and having the council. I intend to push for at least 3 resolutions to be passed: one for economics, one for educational improvements, and the other for public safety. And again, each of those will basically be a statement from the council that we're going to be intentional about addressing those things long term.
Thank you. I can see how those 3 different issues actually intertwine, and then the solution to unemployment really ties back in with your focus on education.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you also emphasized on your website the importance of promoting public safety, as you already mentioned.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, what do you think is the root cause of Nashville's current situation, and what are some critical components of cultivating a safe community?
Yeah. So in 1963, Nashville proper was predominantly African American. I think it was about 170,000 people, 95% of African American.
Mm-hmm.
But as you perhaps know, the city became a metropolitan area by annexing or bringing in several counties. That population from the African American standpoint went from about 95 to now 26, 28%. And over the years, in my 32 years of being there, I have observed how many natives to Nashville, for whatever reasons, haven't kept up with the changing trends and things of that nature. And subsequently, when the opportunities for economics came, and the Chamber of Commerce actually identified 20 years ago that young people that were in the public schools then would not be able to compete and keep up. Well, to make a long story short, many of the new residents that are coming, which I think we should welcome, are taking advantage of those business opportunities and so forth and so on. So that's caused a friction and a frustration between natives and newcomers in a sense. And I think that what we can do as a council is to educate and make people aware and to empower them to take advantage of some of the economic and social opportunities that are coming, and particularly educational opportunities to improve themselves so that we can reduce the tension and frustration and redirect a lot of that. With the public safety issue, again, many of those young people who have had breakdowns in that regard are incarcerated. Tennessee is a state with a lot of people making plea bargains and things of that nature. A lot of things that we want to do to um, really address that thing and give them the sense that you're a vital part of Nashville, and
Hmm.
the only thing set aside for you is not to be incarcerated and on the periphery of society, but to be an active part of it.
Yeah, thank you so much for your response.
Yes, ma'am.
So I have two more general questions for you.
All
The
right.
first one is, what do you think makes you the ideal candidate?
Well, I don't know what an ideal candidate is, but I can tell you this. I'm certainly ready to use my over 25 years of experience working here in Nashville to improve the quality of life for all of Nashville. I don't consider myself a politician, but an advocate. And you might notice that my campaign website is constituent advocacy. That's my focus.
Hmm.
My observation is I don't know any other focus like that of the 15 candidates running or vying for this for one of those 5 seats. So my ask to the citizens and the voters is to consider how they may benefit from my experience.
On that note, can you tell us a little bit more about the constituency advocacy and how you came up with the name?
Sure. So again, as you've heard me talk about, I have observed a lot of issues, and it's the constituents that seem to be left out most of the time for different reasons. I've observed how people that I voted for have went to office, and through different groups and organizations, requests have been made, and decisions have been made in government that were not in the best interest on the local level. And by local, I mean now specifically in voting precincts. And so constituent advocacy was born out of the idea of developing organized agendas for specific things within each voting precinct. And the constituents were those who determined who it was that best represented their interests, how they should go about identifying the candidates and what they can do and will do and so forth and so on, and how they will empower constituents to um, basically live out the idea of the republic that America is. We have a republic form of government of, for, and by the people. So constituent advocacy empowers the constituents basically to have their government work for them as opposed to them working to try to keep up with their government.
Hmm. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Finally, my last question to wrap up today's interview is that, what is your message for the voters of Nashville?
I am a 32-year-long resident. Both of my children are native Nashvillians. They've been blessed to grow up here, and I believe that every other child in Nashville should have the same type of opportunities to be the best that they can be. And I'd love to use my experiences. My wife and I both are grateful to have spent our time here in Nashville. Love to use those experiences to help improve the quality of life for all close to 656,000 residents of Davidson County. And I would love to be your first choice of the 5 votes for Metropolitan Council at Large in Nashville, Davidson County on August 1st.